Coffee has long become a familiar part of modern life. Every morning, millions of people around the world begin their day with a hot cup of coffee, a simple ritual that helps wake up both the body and the mind. What many people don't realize is that a huge portion of the coffee consumed every day comes from the massive coffee fields of Brazil, a country often called the coffee capital of the world. But behind that rich aroma and familiar bitter taste lies a long journey that few people truly understand. To produce a single cup of coffee that may seem so ordinary, farmers spend years caring for each coffee tree from the time it is just a tiny young plant. In famous coffee-growing regions such as Brazil, Kenya, and Vietnam, coffee is far more than just an agricultural crop. It is the livelihood of millions of families. In some rural communities, nearly every aspect of life revolves around coffee season. From planting and irrigation to harvesting and processing, every stage requires tremendous effort, time, and patience. And then, from the bright red coffee cherries hanging on the branches, the beans begin a journey across thousands of kilometers before finally reaching modern coffee shops around the world. It is this remarkable journey that has transformed coffee from a simple drink into a symbol of culture, economics, and modern global life. But before those coffee beans can appear inside massive export shipments, everything begins with a stage that very few people ever get to see, the planting of young coffee seedlings. In Brazil, home to coffee plantations stretching all the way to the horizon, selecting the right seeds is considered one of the most important steps of the entire process. Farmers do not simply use random seeds. They carefully choose seeds from the healthiest parent trees, ones that produce high yields and can adapt well to the climate of each specific region. After being selected, the seeds are placed in special nursery gardens. Thousands of tiny young plants grow in perfectly organized rows under the sunlight. During the first several weeks, they must be cared for with incredible attention. Soil moisture, irrigation, and sunlight exposure are all controlled with near-perfect precision. A sudden weather change or an outbreak of pests can seriously damage an entire generation of young plants. After a few months, once the seedlings become strong enough, they are finally moved into the vast open fields. And this is where farmers begin a long and challenging journey. Unlike many short-term crops, coffee trees take around 3 to 4 years before producing their first harvest. That means farmers must invest huge amounts of time, labor, and money long before seeing any return. And perhaps it is this patience and dedication that give every coffee bean we drink each day its true value. Once the first coffee trees begin taking root in the fields, the farmer's work becomes far more demanding. This stage lasts for years and almost completely determines the quality of the future harvest. Every day, farmers must constantly monitor the growth of the trees, check soil moisture, manage irrigation, and inspect every branch and leaf for signs of pests or disease. In major coffee-growing regions like Brazil and Vietnam, even a long drought or excessive rainfall can seriously damage an entire season's crop. What makes coffee farming especially challenging is that coffee trees cannot simply be left to grow naturally. Farmers must regularly prune the branches to keep the trees healthy and ensure nutrients are directed toward the strongest branches. Weak or diseased branches are removed completely. Some plantations cover hundreds of hectares, yet every section still requires careful and detailed attention. And ironically, this quiet and exhausting work is something most coffee drinkers around the world never get to see. Then, after years of waiting, the first clusters of bright white coffee flowers finally begin to bloom after the early seasonal rains. Suddenly, the entire field is covered in white blossoms and filled with a soft, distinctive fragrance. For farmers, this is the moment they realize that years of hard work are finally beginning to pay off. If you're surprised by how much time and effort it takes just to produce a single cup of coffee, comment number 1 below. But coffee flowers last for only a very short time. After just a few days, the white petals begin falling to the ground, making way for tiny young coffee cherries to slowly form along the branches. And from this moment on, the coffee tree enters the most important stage of the entire year, the fruit development stage. Over the next 6 to 9 months, nearly all of the tree's nutrients and water are focused on helping the cherries grow evenly. At first, the coffee cherries are small and light green. but over time, they gradually grow larger beneath the sun of the tropical highlands. For farmers, this is also the most stressful period of the season. A sudden drought, non-stop heavy rain, or extreme heat can cause large numbers of cherries to fall before they are fully ripe. In some major coffee-growing regions of Brazil, rare frost events have even destroyed millions of coffee trees, causing global coffee prices to fluctuate dramatically within just a few days. Because of this, irrigation systems often run almost non-stop throughout the fruit-growing period to keep soil moisture stable. Farmers must also provide additional nutrients to ensure the coffee beans inside each cherry develop as fully as possible. Then, after many months of waiting, the cherries finally begin changing color from green to yellow and eventually deep red, the clear sign that the biggest harvest season of the year is about to begin. And this is exactly the stage when massive coffee plantations stretching across hundreds of hectares suddenly come alive with non-stop activity. Once harvest season officially begins, the atmosphere on coffee farms changes dramatically within just a few days. Early in the morning, long lines of workers appear among the coffee rows stretching all the way to the horizon. The sounds of machinery, trucks, and people working fill the fields, creating an incredibly busy scene. This is also the most important time of the year because all the effort spent caring for the trees over many years now depends on whether the harvest happens at exactly the right moment. On farms producing high-quality coffee, handpicking is still preferred. Workers move carefully along each row of trees, selecting only the cherries that are fully ripe and deep red. Although it may seem simple, this job actually requires a great deal of experience. If the cherries are picked too early, the beans will not develop their best flavor. But if they are left too long, they can dry out or fall to the ground, reducing quality. That is why many farms divide the harvest into several separate rounds, spaced days or even weeks apart, to ensure most cherries are collected at peak ripeness. Meanwhile, in Brazil's massive coffee-growing regions, where plantations can cover thousands of hectares, enormous harvesting machines operate non-stop throughout the day. These machines move along the rows of trees, shaking them powerfully so the coffee cherries fall into automated collection systems below. In just a few hours, a single machine can harvest as much coffee as hundreds of manual workers could collect over several days. And yet, even after the cherries are harvested, the real journey of coffee is only beginning. As soon as coffee cherries are picked from the branches, they must be processed as quickly as possible. If they are left too long under outdoor temperatures, natural fermentation can begin and completely change the flavor of the beans inside. That is why, during harvest season, trucks and transport systems on large farms in Brazil and Colombia operate almost non-stop, moving freshly picked coffee from the fields to processing facilities within just a few hours. At these facilities, tons of coffee cherries are poured into massive processing systems. Some farms still choose the traditional dry processing method, a technique that has existed for centuries. The red coffee cherries are spread across enormous drying patios under the sun. For many days, workers constantly turn the cherries to ensure they dry evenly and do not develop mold. From above, the drying yards look like giant endless red carpets stretching across the landscape. However, in many premium coffee-producing regions, the modern wet processing method is preferred. The outer skin of the cherries is removed almost immediately using specialized machines before the beans are placed into fermentation tanks. This stage is considered one of the most critical parts of the entire process because it can directly determine the final flavor of the coffee. Even a difference of just a few hours in fermentation time can significantly change the acidity, sweetness, and aroma of the beans. Many people think coffee is simply roasted and brewed, but in reality, behind every cup lies an incredibly complex and precise process. If you're surprised by how detailed this journey really is, comment number 1 below. After completing the drying or fermentation process, the coffee beans move into another extremely important stage: sorting and cleaning. At this point, the final outer layers surrounding the beans are removed using specialized machinery. Millions of coffee beans pass continuously through vibrating conveyor systems, air blowers, and size sorting machines that separate the beans into different quality grades. This is also the moment when the true value of the coffee begins to be determined. Beans with uniform size, attractive color, and no defects are classified as premium quality and reserved for high-end coffee brands. Meanwhile, smaller or defective beans are typically used for commercial coffee or instant coffee products. In many large processing facilities, this entire operation is now almost fully automated using modern technology. Cameras and electronic sensors can detect defective beans in a split second before removing them from the production line. Once sorted, the green coffee beans are packed into large sacks weighing around 60 kilograms and prepared for export around the world. From ports in Brazil, Vietnam, and Colombia, millions of tons of coffee cross the oceans every year on their way to Europe, the United States, Japan, and dozens of other countries. What's fascinating is that at this stage, the beans still do not have the familiar aroma we associate with coffee shops. All of those rich flavors and smells only appear during the next step, coffee roasting. And this is the moment when those small green coffee beans are about to undergo the biggest transformation of their entire journey. When the green coffee beans are finally placed inside the roasting machines, the true flavor of coffee begins to awaken. At first, the beans are pale green and have almost no recognizable aroma. But after just a few minutes under extremely high temperatures, their color gradually changes from yellow to light brown and eventually to a deep dark brown with an oily surface. At the same time, countless chemical reactions begin happening inside each bean, creating the rich aroma that millions of people around the world can recognize almost instantly. What makes roasting especially fascinating is that even a small change in temperature or roasting time can completely transform the flavor of the coffee. Light roasts usually preserve brighter acidity and more natural fruity notes. Dark roasts, on the other hand, create a stronger, more bitter flavor with smoky and chocolate-like characteristics. That is why many professional roasters consider this stage more of an art form than a normal industrial process. In modern roasting facilities, the entire roasting system is often controlled almost completely by computers. Temperatures are monitored every second to ensure the beans reach the perfect roast profile. But in many small artisanal roasting shops, roasters still rely heavily on experience and instinct to decide the exact moment the coffee should come out of the machine. They listen carefully for the bean's first crack, observe subtle color changes, and even judge the roast by the shifting aroma in the air. And only after this stage do those once simple green beans from distant farms truly become the drink that captivates the world every single day. After roasting, coffee enters the final stage before appearing in modern coffee shops around the world, grinding and brewing. This is also where the differences between various coffee styles become most noticeable. Some places prefer strong espresso topped with a rich golden crema. Others enjoy the slow and traditional drip of Vietnamese Phin coffee that takes several minutes to brew. Meanwhile, in many Asian countries, instant coffee and canned coffee have become part of everyday life. What makes coffee especially fascinating is that even when it comes from the exact same bean, different brewing methods can create completely different experiences. Simply changing the grind size, water temperature, or extraction time can dramatically affect the final flavor. That is why baristas at many specialty coffee shops spend years training to control even the smallest details of the brewing process with precision. But perhaps what truly makes coffee special goes far beyond taste alone. In many countries, coffee has become deeply connected to culture and daily life. In Italy, people often drink espresso quickly while standing before heading to work. In Vietnam, sidewalk coffee shops have long been a familiar gathering place every morning. And in countries like the United States and South Korea, modern coffee chains are closely tied to urban lifestyles and work culture. And perhaps very few people realize that behind every small cup of coffee lies a journey that stretches across multiple countries, hundreds of processes, and the hard work of countless people over many years. And because of this enormous global demand, coffee has become one of the most valuable agricultural industries in the world. Every year, billions of cups of coffee are consumed daily, supporting a massive production and trading system that operates almost non-stop. From farmers working in remote highlands to multi-billion-dollar coffee corporations, all of them are connected by these small coffee beans. In Brazil, millions of hectares of land are dedicated entirely to coffee farming, with plantations so vast that even drones can struggle to capture them in a single shot. Meanwhile, in Vietnam, coffee has become one of the country's most important agricultural exports. In particular, Robusta coffee, known for its strong flavor and high caffeine content, is shipped worldwide to support the instant coffee and espresso industries. Beyond its huge economic value, coffee also creates jobs for tens of millions of people. Harvest workers, truck drivers, factory employees, exporters, and baristas in modern coffee shops are all part of this enormous global supply chain. In many rural communities, coffee farms are even treated as family assets passed down from one generation to the next. A healthy coffee tree can continue producing for decades when properly cared for. And because the industry is so valuable, the global coffee market is constantly affected by harvest seasons, weather conditions, and consumer demand. A major drought in Brazil or lower production in Vietnam can cause coffee prices worldwide to shift dramatically within just a few days. But what many people don't realize is that even though coffee generates enormous profits for the global market, the lives of many coffee farmers are far from easy. Coffee prices constantly rise and fall from year to year, while the costs of fertilizer, labor, and farm operations continue increasing. In good seasons, farmers may be able to expand production and improve their quality of life. But during poor harvests or periods of falling prices, many families struggle financially for long periods of time. Beyond economic pressure, climate change is also becoming one of the biggest threats facing the global coffee industry. Long droughts, rising temperatures, and unpredictable rainfall are causing many traditional coffee-growing regions to lose the ideal conditions needed for coffee trees to thrive. In Brazil, some plantations have suffered severe damage from unexpected frost and extreme weather. Meanwhile, in parts of Africa, pests and water shortages are reducing coffee yields year after year. Because of these challenges, many countries and major coffee companies are investing heavily in modern agricultural technology. Automated irrigation systems, soil moisture sensors, and drones used to monitor crops are helping farmers manage risks more effectively. Some researchers are even developing new coffee varieties that are more resistant to drought and disease in order to adapt to changing climates. And perhaps that is why the true value of a cup of coffee is not found only in its flavor, but also in the countless struggles and efforts hidden behind every harvest season, efforts that most people never get to see. Despite changing dramatically over time, coffee still holds a special place in modern life. For many people, coffee is much more than just a drink that helps them stay awake. It is part of a daily routine, a short break during a busy workday, or even the starting point for conversations and relationships. From crowded sidewalk cafes in Vietnam to elegant coffee shops in Europe and the United States, coffee can be found almost everywhere in the world. What makes coffee even more fascinating is that every country has its own unique way of enjoying it. Italians are famous for their strong espresso, quickly consumed before work. In Turkey, traditional coffee is brewed in special copper pots and served with its signature fine grounds. Meanwhile, in Vietnam, the slow drip of thin coffee has become a cultural tradition passed down through generations. And although brewing methods may differ, one thing remains the same: coffee continues to bring people together in modern life. Beyond culture and tradition, many studies also suggest that coffee, when consumed in moderation, may provide several health benefits, including improved focus, reduced fatigue, and better brain function. Of course, balance is still the key to enjoying it in a healthy way. And perhaps that is exactly why, after hundreds of years of history and development, coffee has never lost its appeal and continues to remain an essential part of everyday life for billions of people around the world. And yet, when the final cup of coffee is placed on the table each morning, very few people truly think about the enormous journey behind it. From tiny seeds planted deep in the soil, through years of care under harsh sun and rain, across stressful harvest seasons, and then through countless stages of processing, roasting, grinding, and global transportation, all of it happens just to create the familiar flavor we enjoy every day. What makes coffee especially remarkable is that even as technology becomes more advanced, the human role in the industry still cannot be fully replaced. From farmers quietly caring for every coffee tree to skilled roasters controlling every second of heat inside the roasting machines, each person contributes to the final quality of the coffee bean. And perhaps it is this combination of nature, technology, and human experience that has made coffee one of the most fascinating agricultural industries in the world. Looking back at the entire journey, it becomes clear that coffee has never been just a drink that helps people stay awake. It represents the hard work of millions of people, the culture of countless nations, and an essential part of modern life itself. From massive farms in Brazil, Vietnam, and Ethiopia to crowded coffee shops in busy cities, all of them are connected by these small coffee beans. If you made it this far, comment number 1 below to support the video. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so we can continue exploring more fascinating journeys in agriculture, production technology, and industrial processes in future videos.